So we have less people for Prabhupada Appearance Day. But this year we are requesting everyone. We want a big, big crowd to glorify Srila Prabhupada. It's a Saturday, so we want everyone to please join us on Friday for Janmashtami and then Saturday for Prabhupada's Appearance Day. Okay? So lots of festivities, and that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness. Just so many ways to celebrate, so many occasions to actually celebrate. Come together, chant the holy name, have prasadam, do service, and that's our bliss of Bhakti Yoga, bliss of Krishna consciousness. Okay? So I think we are at time to start the class. Yes. Okay, so we request everyone, please kindly come forward for the class. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, that's good. So we're going to have a little overview of the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita today. And just like we did last week, we did, of course, the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So the 13th chapter is interesting in the same way as the 8th chapter because Krishna spends the whole chapter answering Arjuna's original question at the beginning of the chapter. So it's really interesting, all these different topics like the field of activities. And many people are bewildered when they hear the beginning of this, the first question that Arjuna asked, the Purusha, the field of activities, and what's going on here? 13th chapter bewilders a lot of people. First chapter is easy, because that's just the battlefield of Kurukshetra, which everybody knows about already, right? And the second chapter is pretty easy because, what? You're not the body. And you're undergoing reincarnation. Third chapter, gets into karma, yoga, karma. So this 13th chapter usually bewilders people. So I did an analysis of the chapter and the different topics. And you'll get a chance to hear the different topics explained in a very, very simple way. Hopefully interesting, but philosophical at the same time. So we got the first verse up here. So let's chant Jai Radha Madhava first. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Vihari Gopinana Malabha Girivarudharuti Gopinana Malabha Girivarudharuti Sudanandana Rajajana Ranjana Sudanandana Rajajana Ranjana Gunatera Vanachare Yamuna Tera Panachare Jayurad Umadumba Kunyabhikare Jayurad Umadumba Kunya Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Balaba, Iri Barudhaude. Gopi Jana Balaba, Iri Barudhaude. Yasodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yasodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yamuna Tera Vanachari Yamuna Tera Vanachari Jai Radhu Madhuva Kunya Bihari Jai Radhu Madhuva Kunya Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravitakacharya also Teda Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Chalanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Vilas Thakur Ki Jai Friends, say Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Ramanityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shishi Radha Krishna Gopi Govanath Shayam Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuranam Ki Jai Jagadata Swami Ki Jai Madhumai Ki Jai Srimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Sama Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Parimananda Hari Hari Gaur. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachari Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deja Tarani. So, Om Gana Timidanda Shagananjana Shlakaya Chakshura Meditam Yeda Tasmai Shiguraveda Mahai. Offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master's divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is called Nature of the Enjoyer and Consciousness. So, let's start by reading the verse. And we're just going to read verse 1, and then I'm going to explain how different verses, maybe even mention the numbers of the verses, although we won't have a chance to recite those specific verses. But the numbers of the verses that deal with specific topics regarding the topics brought up by Arjuna in the question he raises with the first verse. And I know, like I said before, many devotees read this first verse and they're thinking, oh my God, this is so difficult to understand, isn't it? So we're going to go over this first verse right now. So, first verse starts as follows. Arjuna Uvacha, Arjuna says, Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Kshetram Kshetrajnam Evacha Etad Veditum Ichami Jnanam Gyayam Jakeshava. And so the synonyms are Arjuna Uvacha means Arjuna said. Prakritim, nature. Purusham, the enjoyer. Cha, also. Eva, certainly. Kshetram, the field. That's a little confusing for most of you. The field. What is the field? Kshetra Yam, the knower of the field. Eva, certainly. Cha, also. Etat, all this. Veditum, to understand. Ichami, I wish. Jnanam, knowledge. Geyam, the object of knowledge. Cha, also. Keshava, O Krishna. We're not going to read Krishna's response, just Arjuna's question. So the translation of Arjuna's question is, Arjuna said, "Oh, my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field, and the knower of the field, and knowledge, and the object of knowledge." And we'll read part of Prabhupada's purport, but not the whole purport. Arjuna was inquisitive about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, Kshetra, the field, Kshetragya, its knower, and the knowledge, and the object of knowledge. So now Prabhupada gets into the answers, but I'm going to speak about the answers to these particular questions. So before we talk about the answer to the questions, in the 19th verse of the chapter, Krishna actually says only devotees can understand this. It's very interesting. Because, excuse me, because Krishna has to reveal this knowledge to devotees. As Krishna says in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that Tesham satadhyuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. To those who are devoted to me, satadhyuktanam, they're always connected with me. Bhajatam pratipurvakam, and they worship me with love. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. I give them this knowledge, buddhi yoga, transcendental understanding how to connect with me. Yenamam upayantite, in which they can come to me. So, also in this chapter of the Bhagavad Gita says one who understands the answers to these questions, these factors, will attain liberation and not take birth again. So you get these benedictions. That's in the 24th verse of this chapter. And just a general description of the questions before we get into the answers. So the last general description is anyone who sees that there's only a combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field here, that's all that's happening. That's interesting, isn't it? It's only, okay, so you don't know what the knower of the field is and what the field is yet. But if you understand and see that that's all that's happening in this world, you, the soul, are not doing anything. I mean, you have some desire, but then because of that desire, there's the interaction of the field of activities and the knower, which we're going to get to in a second. So first of all, I think we should understand who is the knower of the field of activities. And what is the field of activities? Of course, Krishna also defines the field of activities as the body. That's your field of activities. But then the knower, there's several knowers, actually 2 knowers, of this field of activities. One knower is you. I mean, you know your pains and your pleasures and you know what's happening. Hopefully you know what's happening to you. But then there's another knower, and this second verse, of course, Krishna says that. In the 3rd verse in this chapter, Krishna says, I am also the knower. And Krishna, in order to verify his own statements, to show us that whatever statement you make, even if you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you should verify it with Shastric reference. It's interesting. Krishna says in the Gita, he says, this knowledge of the knower is described in the Vedanta Sutra. So Krishna's making scriptural reference. He's not just saying, this is what I say. But Krishna is showing us the importance of when we speak about spiritual subject matters, or even material subject matters, or even scientific subject matters, we should have some reference. Just like Prabhupada said, that when there's a lawyer who is testifying before a judge, he can't just give his opinion. He has to give citations. He says, it says in this particular judgment that was passed in this particular year, book number 345 or whatever, this is the opinion given. So it's very important. So Krishna is establishing that fact in this particular chapter, that everything he speaks is also verified in the Vedas. So we know what the knower of the field is, and we know what the field is right now. So let's talk about what knowledge is. So there's several descriptions of knowledge in this particular chapter. But the most important description is to know, to understand this body and the knower. That's described as knowledge. And then once one understands that, that's in the third verse of this particular chapter, then there's a whole bunch of different positive qualities that stem from that. Positive qualities that a person exhibits. And I'm going to read the list of positive qualities. I don't have time to unpack each one. Humility. Once you understand that the soul is doing nothing, the soul is inhabiting the body, the soul is the knower of the body, the soul is not the body, and Krishna is knowing everything, and Krishna is in everyone's heart. He's the ultimate knower. Then these qualities develop, such as humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity. Then you approach a bona fide spiritual master. There's many qualities here. Cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego. That means thinking, I'm the doer. Ishwaroham aham bhogi siroham balavan sukhi, as Krishna talks about in the chapter Divine and Demoniac Natures. I am the controller. I am the proprietor. I am the enjoyer. Siroham balavan sukhi. I am perfect, powerful, and happy, which many of us are thinking like that. Many of us are thinking we can control things, isn't it? And then we discover after some time you can't control things. There's this rule, and I forget the name of the rule, some body materialist made this up, that if something could go wrong, it will go wrong. What's the name of that rule? Murthy's Law, yeah. And I tell you, that's my experience. So, perception of the evil, birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment. I'm just reading a few of these. Even-mindedness amongst pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to Krishna, aspiring to live in a solitary place. Solitary place doesn't mean you want to just be by yourself. It means you want to live with spiritualists, like-minded spiritualists. Detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, philosophical search for the absolute truth. Krishna says, all these I declare to be knowledge, and whatever there is besides this is ignorance. Wow. So what we're doing should fall under one of these categories. Of course, that's, if you're interested in reading the Bhagavad Gita later on, that's in verses 8 to 12 of this particular chapter. So these are the qualities we should be exhibiting. And if we're exhibiting other qualities that run contrary to these qualities, we should understand this is ignorance. We're under the modes of nature, particularly the modes of ignorance and passion. And so that's knowledge according to Krishna. So that defines that particular subject matter. And the object of knowledge, what is the object of knowledge? There's several different objects of knowledge. First of all, the most important object described by Krishna is Brahman. Now the word Brahman means the greatest, but in this particular context, it means spiritual reality, especially the three aspects of the absolute truth, Brahma iti, Bhagavan iti, Paramatma iti, Shabhyate, Vedanta tat tattva viras tattvam yad ganim advayam. The Brahman effulgence of the Lord, the localized Paramatma, and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna personally. So Krishna describes the Brahman, the energy of the Lord, the spiritual energy, the spiritual effulgence of the Lord is subordinate to him. So Krishna is establishing a hierarchy here. But it's beyond this world, and it's beyond the world of cause and effect. Everything in this world has some cause. And Krishna is called what? Sarva Karana Karanam. Krishna is the cause of all causes. But even the Brahman, the energy of the Lord, the effulgence of the Lord, which is not actually impersonal. Sometimes Brahman is described as impersonal, but it's actually composed of tiny little Jiva Souls floating around. And so that energy of the Lord is subordinate to Krishna, and it's beyond the cause and effect of this world. So, therefore, let's talk about the creation of this material world. The scientists talk about how there was a big bang from nothing, or explosion, or at a certain point everything came to existence. And so they really can't explain, using the laws of cause and effect, how something like that could occur. But it's obvious, if you understand this logically, that this occurred because something beyond cause and effect caused it to exist, to manifest. And then Krishna describes Brahman further, and then he gets into the super soul, which is the Paramatma manifestation of the Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart and every atom. He says, everywhere his hands and legs exist, his eyes and faces, he hears everything. That's called the Paramatma. In this way, the super soul exists. He's the source of all senses. But he doesn't have material senses. He's unattached, and he's transcendental. He's the transcendental master of everything. As we say, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. He exists everywhere, internally, externally. And he's beyond our material senses. He's far away and near as well. Prabhupada describes sometimes that the super soul in the heart is not really materially situated. You know, sometimes we think that if you take a CT scan, which I recently had, not in my heart, it was a different part of the body, but if you have a CT scan, you're going to actually see the soul or super soul. But the super soul is transcendental. Prabhupada describes he manifests his presence just like the moon is in the sky. It is above and beyond this earth planet. And this moon manifests its presence in various bodies of water. You would say, oh, look at the moon. So it's similar. It's a metaphor. Of course, the super soul does more than that. As we know from the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Matak Smritya Jnanam Apohanam Cha, that the super soul gives us intelligence, remembrance, and forgetfulness according to our desire. If we desire to forget Krishna, then the super soul gives us forgetfulness. And if we desire to know God, then the super soul, by the mercy of the super soul, he guides us to a bona fide spiritual master. Brahmanda Brahmate Konda Bhagyavan Jiv Guru Krishna Prasade Vai Bhakti Latapish. It's not by accident that one comes in touch with someone like Srila Prabhupada. It happens because the Super Soul arranges it. That was my personal experience before I came into touch with Krishna consciousness. I was praying to God intently to send me some guidance. You can move up a little bit. And then all of a sudden, as I was praying to God, I turned on the radio, and there was Prabhupada chanting. And all of a sudden, I was working a job, and someone gave me a Krishna book. One of my co-workers gave me a Krishna book. And all of a sudden, I read that Krishna book, and I couldn't keep my mind off of that little blue boy who was stealing butter and feeding it to monkeys. And it happened because the Super Soul arranged that. Nothing happens by accident. Also, the Super Soul is described as that he's never divided, he's always one. He's the source of light, the object of knowledge. Krishna directly says he's the object of knowledge, the goal of knowledge, and of course, as I mentioned before, in everyone's heart, and you can perceive him through meditation, cultivation of knowledge, and working in devotional service. You can actually perceive the Super Soul. And one who sees the Super Soul, understands the Super Soul, does not degrade himself, because he understands Krishna is always there with him. He's the overseer. He's the permitter. He's watching you at every minute. So that's the object of knowledge. So we describe the object of knowledge. We describe knowledge, the knower of the field. And we describe the field. Actually, there's some more descriptions of the fields, which are very much in line with Sankhya philosophy, which describes the different material elements like earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, sense, false ego, and the different sense objects, the perceptive senses, the active senses, the life symptoms, and its interactions. And so, and then finally, actually there's two more subject matters in this chapter. One is Prakriti. So Krishna describes Prakriti, which means this material energy, as beginningless, which is interesting. So why do we have a creation if Prakriti is beginningless? That means without beginning. Well, the reason is that Prakriti always exists, at least in a potential state. That's called the pradhana. And at the time of the material creation, Krishna in the form of Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, breathes out, and the material universes come out from his body, and he looks at these different material universes that come out from his body in the form of bubbles, and he implants the living entities, Aikshata, with his glance. He implants them within the living, the material universes. There's many, many, many material universes. So that's the material nature. It's beginningless, and it's the cause of all activities and effects. So in other words, the material universe is set up in terms of this causal chain. And the final subject, hope you're all following me, is actually the Jiva Soul. Actually, I left one out. The Purusha and enjoyer are the same. He's the supreme proprietor. He's the overseer and permitter, which I actually mentioned. And the final subject is mentioned here is the Jiva Soul. That's us. We are the marginal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has three basic categories of energies: Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta, Kshetra Gyakya Tata Para Vidyakarma Sangyagya Tritiya Shakti Ishate. He has the spiritual energy, the para prakriti. He has the material energy, which is the apara prakriti, and he has the marginal potency, which is the jiva souls. That's ourselves. So we have the ability to choose to associate with the external, the material energy, or the spiritual energy. But the material energy causes all the activities and effects. In other words, if we act in a certain way materially, we get a certain effect. Just like there's the laws of karma. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. For example, if one eats something that he's not supposed to eat, like meat, then there's a law of karma that comes back to you in the future. Maybe not instantaneously. Maybe your next life. Maybe later in this life. So that's the action and reaction, the cause and effect. So those are fixed in this world. However, if one becomes a devotee of Krishna, then Krishna, by the process of devotional service and coming in contact with Krishna, Krishna gets rid of that karma for a devotee. Otherwise, you're under the laws of cause and effect. Therefore, because you're under the laws of cause and effect, it's not the material energy's fault that you're suffering or enjoying. You're the one who's responsible for your sufferings and enjoyment in this world. Does that make sense? Something happens if you're not a spiritualist. If you're a spiritualist, then you're directly Daivam Prakritim Ashrita. Then you're under Krishna's internal potency. So even if someone takes up spirituality, Krishna consciousness, and is just beginning Krishna consciousness, Krishna takes charge of such a person. He may reduce the reactions that you're getting. That's called token reaction. And Krishna will arrange things that are best for your spiritual advancement. That's a really important point. So otherwise, if you're not engaged in spirituality, it's all karma and the material energy giving you a reaction to the actions, and that's it. And therefore, Krishna says in the Gita, in the 21st chapter, 21st verse in this chapter, that we are responsible for the sufferings and enjoyments in this world, for our own personal sufferings and enjoyments in this world. Krishna also talks about the nature of ourselves. He says the soul is beginningless. Of course, we learn about that in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita too. Ajo nitya sashrato yam parana nahanyate hanumane shirire. Najayate mrite va kadachin nayam bhutva va nabuyaha. For the soul there is neither birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He's unborn, primeval, and not slain when the body is slain. So we learn about all these different aspects of the soul, even in the second chapter, but in this particular chapter, Krishna makes it very clear. The soul is beginning. It was never created. It's always, or he or she has always been in existence. And the soul, at this point, in material life, is enjoying or suffering the three modes of nature by association. And because of his association with these three modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, he meets with positive or negative results. And Krishna calls this good or evil within this world. But he still is eternal. He doesn't mix with the material energy. That's really important. Just like the sky, Krishna gives the example, doesn't mix with anything. Sky, in this particular context, means like space, doesn't mix with anything. And ultimately, the soul, who we are, is illuminating the entire body by consciousness. So all these different subject matters are being described in this verse. Just to go over it very quickly again. Prakriti is the material energy. Purusha is the enjoyer. Purusha is the enjoyer, who is Krishna. The field is this body. The knower of the field is one who knows this body, and also Krishna. Knowledge means to understand the body and its owner, and to understand Krishna too. And Krishna, in his various aspects, Brahmaiti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan Iti, Shabdyate, is the object of knowledge. So this is the summary of the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So, hope you all understood this. Does anyone have any questions? Questions? Yes, Rishikesh.
What's the difference between Purusha and
Purusha, Kshetragya is the knower of the body. Purusha can mean several different things. It can mean the person and also can mean Krishna. And both are knowers of the body, yes.
In one sense, both are Purusha also, right? Krishna as well as the soul.
Yeah, Krishna is Purusha. I mean, he's the supreme Purusha. Purusha can be understood as person, or it can be understood as, supreme male. And the knower of the body is one who knows the body, and Krishna knows the body. And of course, to know the body, okay, I think we need to get more specific about this. To know the body means to know you're not the body. It doesn't mean just to know, oh, I know my hands, something like that. That's what it means. That's knowledge. That's a knower of the body. Means to know that I'm driving the body, I'm not the body, I'm the spirit soul. And also I have a subtle body, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And this subtle body, as described by Krishna, carries the soul, or the soul carries it, from one lifetime to another. Just like the air carries aromas from one place to another. So in other words, depending on the shape of your subtle body, or let us say the desires of your subtle body, or the constitution of your subtle body, you take a particular type of gross body. Gross body means Panchamahabhuta, the body that you can touch. Earth, water, fire, air, and ether body. So you take a particular type of gross body, but you take your subtle body with you from one life to another. Like whatever your consciousness is like now, you take that consciousness to your next body. That's really important. So it's time to change your consciousness, because otherwise you'll have the same consciousness in the next body. Of course, if you've made some advancement in Krishna consciousness, you take off from that point in your next life. You never lose that swapamapyasha dharmasha trayate mahato bayat. In this endeavor, there's no loss or diminution. So that's reassuring. But your consciousness, let's say if you're conscious like Bharat Maharaj was of a deer, you become a deer in your next life. So really, now is the time to shape your consciousness so that you'll have a better birth, or hopefully can go back to home, back to Godhead. Actually, it's described sometimes that the devotional service dissolves the subtle body. That's interesting. Does that mean you have no mind and intelligence? No, you get spiritual mind. Shuddhabhimana. Right? Shuddhabhimana kabihama hey Rabo Sri Vrindavan. And your spiritual mind manifests the spiritual world. So, but your material subtle body gets wiped out by the process of devotional service. And you don't take your material subtle body back to the spiritual world, which would be crazy. Someone asked me that question today on the internet, that we have our subtle body, do we take it back to the spiritual world with us? No. You wouldn't want it in the spiritual world. It doesn't belong in the spiritual world, because your material subtle body is based upon the false ego. Mind, intelligence, and false ego. False ego means I and mine, the two divisions of false ego. In the spiritual world, everything is Krishna's. Everything belongs to Krishna, and everything is meant for his pleasure. In this material realm, we are thinking things can be mine, and everything is meant for my pleasure. So that's the opposite. That's the false ego. So the process of devotional service dissolves, for lack of a better word, dissolves this false ego and dissolves the material subtle body. So one comes to real ego, real mind, and real intelligence. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yanamam upayanti te. Yes, appreciate it.
The knowledge over here is basically the process to know the Lord.
Yeah. I describe knowledge, and then as a result of that knowledge, know the knower and the field and all those other things like that, then you get these good qualities, which I elaborated on. Good question. So anybody else have a question? Yes.
First of all, thank you for explaining so beautifully. My question is that you were telling in the middle of the chapter, Krishna says, when he describes about the Paramatma teacher, he says that he is the one, he talks like the third person. So my question is that, like, already Krishna has talked about the first person in the 10th chapter, in the 11th
Yeah.
chapter, that I am this, I am that. Why again he takes it back to the third person, that he is residing
Because
in?
it's the 13th chapter. But I would say the middle 6 chapters are, the nectar, really about Krishna. And Krishna is giving some Sankhya here, So we can fully understand. First of all, he connects the impersonal with himself to make it very clear that this impersonal Brahman is subordinate to him. I mentioned that, actually.
Yeah, that makes
the Brahman
sense.
is beginning as subordinate to Krishna. Krishna says it's subordinate to me. So he wants to make it very clear so people really understand his identity.
So he's making a distinction between he himself and as a Paramatma and a Brahman?
Yes.
Okay.
He's definitely talking about, in certain verses, he's talking about Paramatma. In certain verses, he's talking about himself. In certain verses, he's talking about Brahman. I mean, it's actually very clear. Very, very clear.
Thank you.
Okay. So, any other questions before we have? Yes.
Never quite understood. If the ego, if the individual ego,
Yeah.
isn't the doer,
Yeah.
where does the volition come from to serve,
Well,
to change?
Yeah.
I've never quite understood this. It's always been a
Good question.
stumbling point for me.
Yeah, so he's not the doer, he can desire. And his desire, whether he's able to, you want to turn it off or something, whether he's able to accomplish what he wants is dependent upon the action and reaction of this material energy and is dependent on Krishna giving intelligence. So we can't do whatever we want to do. Does that make sense? So we're not the doer, but we're responsible for desiring to embark upon a particular course of action. It's a little subtle there. It's a good question. But we're not the doer. It's all dependent on Krishna. Krishna, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's a little subtle. It's a little subtle. Because you and I can't decide, we're not independent from Krishna, so we can't decide to do something unless we have the Lord's sanction. Does that make sense? You need a sanction. There's a lot of things I would like to do that I don't have the sanction from Krishna to do. Okay. So we're not the doer. We can desire to do something, but then Krishna gives us the intelligence and the ingredients to do that particular thing, either through his material energy or directly. So, any other questions? If not, that's interesting. It's an interesting chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's one that really needs to be analyzed nicely like that. I went through the whole chapter and listed all the verses that answer the questions that Arjuna asked in the beginning of the chapter. So, with that in mind, are you ready? So, thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. There you go.
Thank you so much, Mara. That was a very beautiful presentation on the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And frankly, if you just read the chapter, it takes like many times readings and a class to understand those terms. But you made it very simple and very wonderfully explained. So thank you so much, Mara. Haribo! His Holiness Bir Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this Sunday onwards we are starting this youth presentations. So the youth of New Goloka are actually, we are seeing them grow over the years, and it's wonderfully how they are so enthusiastically taking up Krishna consciousness. So we want to give them more opportunity to actually share Krishna consciousness, and they are our future leaders, as Maharaj often says. They are the ones who are going to lead the temple, lead the projects, and give classes. So this is also a kind of encouragement and training for the youth of New Goloka. So today it's a short presentation, 10-12 minutes. But today we'll start off with Sarvavit Prabhu. He's going to give the presentation. Hari Bol!
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. I'd first like to thank Shri Radha Golokananda, Srila Prabhupada, Shri Gurudev, and all the assembled Vaishnavas for giving me this opportunity and for supporting me in my Krishna consciousness all these years. Namom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bir Krishna Goswami Niti Namine Namom Sannikashaya Prabhupada Priyate Suddhi Siddhi Nishtabhyam Tasya Vakya Anuvadine Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyati Deshatarne Om Jnanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Vancha kalpatarobhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So today I'd like to present something I just put together about service mood and how we should serve. Next slide, please. So before I start, I'd like to present a question for thinking about through this talk. The question is, what mood of service is most important to you? And obviously, one of the great examples for service is Sri Hanumanji and how he served Lord Ram. Next slide. So I have a small verse from Bhagavad Gita 1855 towards the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. And if everyone could recite with me, that would be nice. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tatvatah tato mam tatvato nyatva vishate tad anantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is only by devotional service, as he's understood only by devotional service, and one is in full consciousness of Supreme Lord by such devotion. He can enter into the kingdom of God. Go back. So, in this verse, Krishna is clearly saying that devotional service is the highest form because the goal of life is to serve God personally, and the ultimate place to serve God personally is the kingdom of God, Goloka Vrindavan. And Krishna has taken all the way through the Bhagavad Gita about different processes of advancing spiritually, and finally at the conclusion, Krishna says, by devotional service, you can understand me and enter the kingdom of God. So this illustrates why devotional service is so very, very, very important. So in the purport, what does Srila Prabhupada say? Srila Prabhupada says, only by devotional service, reiterates what Krishna says, only by devotional service can one understand who Krishna is. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about many different processes like mental speculation, karma yoga by work, but only by devotional service can you understand who Krishna is. And like I said, mental speculation is useless for understanding about Krishna, and this is why devotional service is so very, very important. Next slide, please. So, as I said at the beginning, I introduced the question of what mood is most favorable for you while conducting devotional service. So, anyway, I feel that humility is the most important characteristic of devotional service. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshashtakam very clearly says, and if you can all recite with me, that would be nice. Tinadapi sunichena tarorapi saishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all false sense of prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So I've highlighted the section Amanina Manadena for a specific reason. So I just talked about humility and why humility is so important in devotional service. Humility is so important in devotional service because when you are humble, it opens the doors for getting the mercy of Krishna, of the devotees, of Guru Janas. So this line is highlighted because one should be ready to offer all respect to others, and specifically in reference to the Vaishnavas. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not only referring to the fact that one should be able to offer obeisances to the Vaishnavas, but also one should be able to render service to the Vaishnavas. That's also very, very, very important. So that's the next slide, please. So Vaishnava Seva. Like Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has brought to us the process of chanting Hare Krishna, and in Bhagavatam it's also stated that there are many paths of devotional service, but today I'd like to highlight Dasya, specifically Vaishnava Seva, that aspect of devotional service. Vaishnava Seva is very, very important for spiritual growth because only by the mercy of the devotees and by the mercy of gurus can we slowly begin to come closer to Krishna and understanding Krishna. And this is explained in Sri Upadeshamrita, which is written by, of course, one of our great acharyas, Srila Rupa Goswami. And I would also like to highlight two very key examples of Vaishnava Seva from the Bhagavatam. First is Maharaj Ambarisha, and I'd just like to, for those who are unfamiliar, just to summarize the story of both of these great personalities. So Ambarish Maharaj was a great king and known for offering a lot dakshina and offering a very service to all the brahmanas and Vaishnavas. And so on one particular day of fasting, after the day of fasting, Sri Ambarish Maharaj was approaching the time to break the fast with water. And at that same time came one very famous personality that we know. Shri Durvasa Muni came. And generally when Brahmana comes, especially someone of that stature, before taking anything yourself, you offer to them. And because the time of fasting was already upon Ambarish Maharaj, he decided to break his fast with water and then go and give Durvasa Muni his offerings. Durvasa Muni obviously saw this and was very, very upset and started cursing Ambarish Maharaj in all various ways. Seeing this, Krishna was very, very upset that Durvasa Muni was attacking his very, very humble devotee. And he sent the Sudarshan Chakra chasing Durvasa Muni all across the universe to try to kill him, basically. And at the end of the story, Durvasa Muni comes and offers his respects to Ambarish Maharaj, signifying that Ambarish Maharaj is indeed a great devotee. So if Durvasa Muni himself has to bow down to Ambarish Maharaj, how great of a personality Ambarish Maharaj is. And how he get that stature? Through Vaishnava Seva. Another very important personality from Srimad Bhagavatam in first canto is explained of Narada Muni. So Narada Muni, in his material body, was a boy of a maidservant of the ashram. And as the saints would come through that ashram, the Narada Muni would offer, obviously, the prasadam to all the saints, and in a very humble and respectful mood, give them conduct the Vaishnava Seva. And after he would take the remnants of after the saints have eaten. And by this process, he was able to attain perfection, and obviously he takes the form of Narada Muni now and travels all over the universe spreading Krishna Prachar. So these two personalities, I think, from Srimad Bhagavatam show very important characteristic, and it shows the overall importance of why Vaishnava Seva is very, very important. Next slide, please. So what are some practical methods of Vaishnava Seva that we can conduct? So, and again, I bring Shri Upadeshamrita, Srila Rupa Goswami's text, and from there it says, giving and accepting gifts, revealing and inquiring personally, and giving and accepting prasadam. These 6 key items are explained. For those of you who know the verse, it's the dadati pratigranati. And these are written in the Shastra, but exactly how practically in our daily lives can we serve Vaishnavas, or in a week, or and so on. So underneath that, I've listed some points, some very basic points. Actually, we see in the society that when one does very high-level activities, he's given a lot of praise. But actually, in devotional life, it's flipped. The more menial the service, the higher stature the person can get amongst the Vaishnavas. So some services that are listed are cooking, cleaning, preaching, and of course offering emotional support, especially in these times. I feel like emotional support is very, very important. Shri Gurudev also conducts his empathetic communication courses, which are very helpful for that. So cooking, obviously, Krishna consciousness is known as the kitchen religion. So we cook, we feed prasadam for all the devotees, everybody that comes. That's the highest seva, and the Srila Prabhupada never compromised on prasadam. Prasadam, prasadam, prasadam. Very, very important. Obviously, cleaning also very, very important. These are many more items can be there also, but I've just listed some things that come to mind. Cleaning, I feel, is very nice because Srila Prabhupada, even in an interview one time, somebody asked Srila Prabhupada, why do you keep the shaved head? And Srila Prabhupada said, for cleanliness. So cleanliness is very, very important because when we keep temple, keep body clean, it makes devotional service very, very, lot easier. And another point, very important, I think maybe most important on this list, is preaching. Because Srila Prabhupada has come all the way from India, risking his life on many, many occasions, and bringing us this transcendental knowledge in the form of books. And he always emphasized print books, spread books, distribute. So when we preach, we are offering our service, our service to the ultimate Vaishnava, Srila Prabhupada, and to all of the Gurujanas that came before him. So preaching is very close to me personally, very, very, very important. Next slide, please. So how can you help in a practical manner? Like I just said, Janmashtami is fast approaching, and I thought this was a good opportune time to bring up the combining of Vaishnava Seva and Janmashtami, because Janmashtami is a huge, huge effort, huge festival. Many, many hands are required to help run New Goloka, especially during that time. So a lot of the practical points that were discussed in the previous slide can be actually accomplished during the time of Janmashtami. It's the perfect time to come and serve and help Srila Prabhupada's movement go forward, especially during this time. Like I said, many opportunities to serve, especially in the kitchen. Again, we are the kitchen religion. A lot of prasadam needs to be cooked. Takes 3-4 days. So that's one of the biggest sevas. And also, we see that many people who are, especially new to the process of Krishna consciousness, they end up coming on Janmashtami. So it's a very nice opportunity to serve Srila Prabhupada, serve Sri Radha Golokananda by distributing books, by teaching people and informing people about Krishna consciousness, about devotional service, like was said in the first slide. Very, very important. The highest knowledge there is. And I'd like to share one small experience about Janmashtami, specifically that I've had over the years. So my personal seva I like to do in the kitchen is frying. I love to fry all things, everything, and and I'm sure everybody likes to eat it as well. It's always delicious. So during that time when you come and you're in the kitchen, it's hot, it's sweaty, everybody's with you, surrounding you, and you're doing the service in the mood of how can I bring more and more people to Krishna consciousness, in this case through prasadam. It's a very humbling experience, very nice experience, and connects you back to God as well. So that's my experience that I would like to share, and I would encourage everybody to come help wherever possible on that day or the days leading up to Janmashtami, whether it be in the kitchen, at the bookstall, at the parking space, here in the temple room, wherever. It's always a very, very nice experience, a very, very humbling experience. So on that note, I would like to thank Shri Gurudev for helping me in my Krishna consciousness. And of course, all of the Vaishnavas for kindling my bhakti for so many years, especially Adityanayan Prabhu, for leading not just myself, but all of us in the many, many activities at Shri New Goloka Dham. So on that note, I'd like to say Hare Krishna, and thank you, dear devotees. So at this time, if anyone wants to take small 1 or 2 questions or reflections, I'd invite the floor to speak. No one? Nobody has anything. Or any corrections? If I said anything wrong, if I said anything offensive, please correct me. Please change my attitude. And if anything you found helpful, please take it. Yes? Thank you very much. Anything, Prabhu. Anything is required to fry, I'll fry everything and anything.
Hare Krishna. So that was wonderful. Yes. So that was wonderful, Sarvai Prabhu. Such a beautiful presentation, and as we started off by saying, they are future leaders, and we see the mood, how they are imbibing Srila Prabhupada's mood, and also philosophically, like presenting so many different shlokas and bringing up the philosophy so nicely. So let's again thank Sarvai Prabhu for wonderful presentation. Haribol! And as Maharaj said, he gave the best compliment. When the spiritual master says, I'm proud of his disciple, then that is the best compliment. So, Hariva. So thank you so much. So a few quick announcements and we'll run down for Prasadam. Prabhu has talked so much about Prasadam. So I'm sure that has increased our appetite to go down and honor Prasadam. Quick announcements. One is we have a special mercy all the way from the holy dhams in India. So Ajay Govind Prabhu and Kirtan Mataji, they were in the dhams. So they have bought some Radha Kund water and some special mercy from the dham which they'll be distributing during the Prasadam. Haribo!